Hello, I'm Lauren Millar. This time on Journeys, I'm going to introduce you to a man with his head in the clouds, Toronto cloud physicist Bob Schemenauer. Now, Schemenauer has solved a mystery that has puzzled scientists for centuries: how to extract microscopic droplets of water from fog. Here in the developing world, disease caused by foul water is the #1 killer of children. And now Schemenauer wants to change all that. He has brought his relatively simple, inexpensive technology to this isolated mountain village in Ecuador. And already, those mysterious-looking nets that you see perched on the mountainside are yielding thousands of liters of fresh, clean water from fog. At 3,000 meters on the rim of a crater in the mountains of Ecuador, Bob Schemenauer's nets invite fog to yield its precious contents. If this experiment works, it could make history.
And fortunately, we don't see how far we could fall if we take about 3 steps the other direction.
I'll be careful.
Yeah, it's you can see how it has texture to it, that it isn't sort of continuous. It's in puffs, and there's, you know, 1 second it's a little heavier than others, and that's really the way the clouds are. There's a lot of turbulence and there's a lot of structure in clouds, and that's really all we're looking at here is clouds down from the crater bottom pushing up through the collectors here. For thousands of years, people have touched trees in fog, and they've known the trees collect water, and they've collected the drip from the trees. But I think it's been partly just a lack of understanding of the process. I mean, there's a lot of people today in developed countries, much less, you know, in very underdeveloped countries, who don't really realize there are liquid droplets in fog.
So these are in the process.
The liquid droplets that Toronto cloud physicist Bob Schemenauer sees in fog have led to this experiment. Undaunted by centuries of failed attempts to extract water from fog, Bob Schemenauer persisted until he discovered the secret. But he hasn't used his genius for fame or fortune. In fact, he has often endured personal expense to take his technology to parts of the world where it's needed most. In this arid place near Quito, Ecuador, clean water can really mean the difference between life and death. This is one of 2 fog-collecting projects in Ecuador, South America.
It does get dark up here fast.
It does. It gets dark very fast. This is the thing.
So it's time to get off.
Yeah, it's time to be moving on. We'll be okay.
Whoa! It's so beautiful how it just rushes through the net.
Today, Bob checks on his second fog-collecting project further south in the Andes Mountains. We're going to a place that time has forgotten, a small village called Pachamama Grande, or Big Mother Earth. It's about an hour's drive up this mountain road to the top at 3,700 meters. Test nets have been built there to see if fog collecting will work for the people living in Pachamama Grande. Here, the soil is parched, the air is thin, and the water is foul.
And at the altitude, and if you got out here and you started walking up that hill, you'd almost die. You know, you just run out of breath and your heart starts pounding. If you wander around Ecuador, you'll find there are so many rural areas where they just don't have the water. And in places like that, if the conditions are right, that's where you're going to find projects like this. I think done on a small scale in many places, in a lot of different countries, in a lot of different climates, from desert to high mountain areas, from relatively wet areas to completely arid ones.
Why Pachamama Grande? How did you find them?
We look first for a place where there's a real social need for water. And we sort of begin there because we don't want to just go and collect fog water. It's not in any way a research project.
Right.
So it has to be a place where there's a community that needs water and where you can't supply the water by some simple conventional means like digging a well. If you can dig a well, you should do that. Or if there's a river with relatively clean water, they should use that water. And we also want to find a place where there's an NGO working, somebody we can work with, because none of us can be here all of the time. You have to have somebody with a constant contact with the community, somebody to carry it out.
Right.
This project got off the ground when Bob learned that a Montreal-based NGO, non-government organization called CC, was working in the area, and that it would help the people here to build the fog collectors. With startup money from Canada's IDRC, Bob flew down a few months ago to assess the potential for fog collection and to choose the sites for test nets.
As well. I mean, you got pigs mixed with sheep, mixed with
cows,
burros and
yes.
cows and everything all together.
Yep. Yeah. And that just shows you how dry it is down here. Up
Not
here.
too bad to run down, but to run up.
Run up.
Pachamama Grande is a cold place. It's a cool place, and you don't tend to think of those sorts of places as lacking water, but it really is a place where the water is missing for the cooking, it's missing for the cleaning, and the water is missing for other things that we take for granted too, like growing something to eat, or growing trees to cut down and use for firewood. So they don't even have heat in their homes. So you're looking at average temperatures 8 or 9 degrees each month, and without a source of fuel.
The only natural water source is an acequia, flowing from a swampy area about 8 kilometers away. It flows past a hacienda where sewage leaches into it and finally ends up here, where it's used for washing and bathing and drinking, or just about everything.
I've done some bacterial analysis, and one can really expect that with a small water source like they have, where the animals are in and bathing and drinking and doing other things, and the people are washing clothes and the children are playing, if that's your source of drinking water, you're going to have a lot of problems with coliform bacteria and bacteria that can, fecal coliforms, that can give you a lot of problems, diarrhea type problems, problems that can cost you your life. They're aware of the fact that the water isn't good. And when I was here in May, they told me that even the animals get sick drinking this water. So they know it isn't good for them. It isn't as if, they're going on saying, oh, this is just fine, and we don't know any better. It isn't true at all. And they also are trying to buy a little bit of water. But the amount they buy, which is half a liter, like a little water bottle that we buy to drink per person a week, is nothing. I mean, it really doesn't go very far, but they try to do what they can with the resources they have.
Fresh water from a town at the base of the mountain costs about $80 a cubic meter. That same amount would cost 80 cents in Canada. These people have little to no income, so clean water is a rare necessity.
So, why do you think that they choose to stay?
I think they stay because they own the land, and I think nobody is trying to take the land away from them. And I don't know, I guess all of us get into, not really a habit, but it's a traditional place they are, and there they own and control land. Land is everything. If you don't have land, you can't make any kind of living whatsoever.
Yeah.
And they have no way to feed themselves. Nobody's going to take care of them. They have no money to buy land.
Would the government buy the land they have now?
I suppose if they had a use for it, but the government doesn't seem to be too into social planning or social assistance in any way.
Yeah, we had a very good trip. It's very short drive on this side of the plateau.
Yeah, the weather station was near the hacienda.
Bob's visit here is a community event, met with great anticipation and curiosity. For Bob, it's a time to get acquainted with his right-hand man who's been living near here to help the villagers build the experimental fog collectors. It's also a time to get reacquainted with his longtime friend and work partner from Chile. Geographer Pilar Saracida has worked with Bob on fog collecting projects for years. Together, they orchestrated the first successful project in Chile, where 11,000 liters a day is flowing from the nets. Brad Henderson is working for the Canadian NGO CC. He's been helping the people understand fog collecting technology and the rigors of experimental science. For the people of Pachamama Grande, the most exciting part of this visit will be the decision about whether this village can be a permanent fog collecting site. Soon Bob and Pilar will inspect the nets to see if they're in the right place to catch wind and fog most efficiently. Building them was truly a challenge.
Well, there's I'd written an email to Bob earlier on about when we'd first gone out to locate them, to dig the holes for them. The fog was so thick we couldn't see anything. And so Sandra took us there and said, here's the place there, and I'd lead these directions, and I look around, so, where are we? Exactly, so we just put them in, so.
No.
Well, we'll see.
Well, when we were here too, I mean, it rained very hard one day and it was very foggy the next day. So despite what you see now, it is a place with fog and rain, and it was very muddy, very wet when we were here before.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. So it's a bit difficult, and you try to orient the collectors not only with the prevailing wind direction, but with the actual topography itself.
What we've done is we've placed 8 collectors in this area, and based on the results from these collectors, will help Bob understand the dynamics of the fog in this area, and if it provides a significant yield of water from these fog collectors, it would allow them to proceed to a second stage, one where they would construct larger scale collectors so that they could provide water for the community at large. The community has been very supportive from the start. Curiosity is probably the best way to describe it. They have been very gracious, always very able to help, very willing to help, and very sensitive people. At the same time, living in this kind of environment, it's a very difficult environment, but at the same time, they're very open and warm to people that are coming to their community to work with them.
The people of Pachamama Grande were granted their historic right to this land after a nationwide indigenous uprising. It wasn't much of a prize. Flat, dry, cold, and isolated. But it's all they have, and they value it highly. Some work or go to school in a village 3 hours' walk down the mountain. Most remain to tend the livestock. It's a difficult hand-to-mouth existence.
It's an agricultural-based economy here. For the most part, they raise animals. In this area, mostly sheep. On this high-altitude pasture, they would pasture the animals. They have some areas that they cultivate, and they grow barley and a type of broad beans, some lentils, a little bit of wheat. And it's a subsistence type of agriculture where, the only time that they're able to earn hard currency is if they have an excess of production. They're somewhat isolated. We're over an hour from the Pan American Highway by Jeep. To walk it is approximately 2 to 3 hours, depending on the load they're carrying. So they're isolated. All in all, it's not an easy life. It's hard. I really don't know how they live on a day-to-day basis. With the temperature and the wind and the cold and the lack of financial opportunities. And the other thing that they're really concerned about is their livestock drinking the polluted water, because their livestock for them is more than just 4 legs running around the yard. For them it is their RSP, it is their savings, and when they need to have money, they sell that. So if they have animals that don't produce well because of poor water supply or die because of it, it's a major economic hardship. The source of the water is at a great distance, and the water flows in an earthen river for many kilometers. So that would probably explain the dark color, is the fact that there's a lot of mud and dirt in it. The more sort of devious part of it is that there's a lot of bacterial in it because of the animals and the human defecation all along the route and the resulting water pollution that occurs when that water then drains into this watershed. So it comes at a great distance, and it's highly used. There's lots of animals and people that depend on this water, and just contributes to a dirty, polluted water source for everyone.
Right now the winds are about 30 to 35 kilometers per hour, which is very brisk. It's about 10 meters a second, which is on the upper range of what the wind speeds are that we like to work in.
Right.
But the collector itself seems to be extremely well made.
Yes.
And like all of the other ones.
How did you and Pilar decide on the location for this?
Well, we've done a lot of sites in a lot of different places, so we have some sort of rules that we work by. And one of the things we want to do, of course, is be in a place where there is some wind, because we have to work with wind, and today we, of course, haven't.
We have wind.
Well, we want to find a place that's on a reasonable rise, so we can deliver water, for example, to the houses that you see down below here.
Right.
If we built some big collectors up in this area, if these clouds were a little bit lower, we'd be collecting water with these southeast winds today. Another thing that interested me when I was here in May, and something that interests both of us, is the fact that trees are very good collectors of fog droplets, and that's how cloud forests work. So we're interested in this cypress tree that's behind here, and so one of the things that I did when I first came was to bring the 10 men who were along with me at the time, and Louis, who was here as well, and we stopped here because it was very foggy. And we looked at the needles on the cypress tree, and you could see large drops of water that had formed on all of the tips of the small branches, just from the fog that was being collected by the tree. And you could see water dripping onto the ground. So it was an excellent way to sort of explain to the people, this is what's happening. I mean, the collectors we're going to put up are similar to what the tree is doing.
Yesterday I was asking the Rosendo how much water the people would use in the houses, and he said 5 liters. 5 liters a day.
A day. And what do Canadians use? Isn't it 300?
We use about
300, right.
350 per person.
Per day.
Per day, just for your household use. So a family of 4, you're talking 1,300 liters per day.
Right.
And they survive on 5.
He told me 5. I was very, very impressed with that. We have found in Peru and in Chile 2 liters per person per day. That's really, but
It's nothing. It's barely enough to drink.
it is a nice wind.
Bob and Pilar have a complementary working relationship. Each brings a unique perspective to these projects. Bob offers meteorology expertise, and Pilar's specialization is topography and social geography. Since they worked together on the first successful fog collecting project in Chile, they've become good friends and a determined team, determined to make fog collection a viable alternative in providing water where there is none.
So now we have the collector facing about 270 degrees, so it's facing pretty well to the west.
Both science, cloud physics, and physical geography, meteorology, climatology, and sometimes I say Bob is in the clouds and I am in the field, so something like that. But there is another part that is the geographical part. It's not only the physical geography, it's the human geography that we are working. Understanding the places where we work, to understand why the people are there, what are they doing, understand the water management, for example. All that for me is geography, and it's something that you would say, oh well, but that's sociology. No, it's a mixture of everything. If people are living there and they don't have water, that's something that's physical geography. But then the people, the way of life or how they live, it's what we are worried about.
Yeah, it's tremendous.
Okay.
So I have to hold it here for about 15 seconds.
And if you hold it for more, it will be better.
We work on, of course, the same basic issue, and we tend to discuss the same problems, and it's good to have somebody to discuss things with, because often if you go someplace on your own, you're always questioning yourself a little bit as to, is this exactly the right place or the right altitude, or should we even be doing things here at all? And if you have somebody right there on the spot who has a lot of experience, it helps a lot. Because you don't want to do something that technically makes sense if it doesn't make any sense for the people. When I first arrived, because it was raining so hard, I was really surprised that there were so many thatched roof houses and everything was made of mud, because the ground was so muddy, and you can just imagine what the conditions must be like, especially when they don't have a lot of wood to heat with.
Right.
So it is a real problem. The rain is a problem, the cold is a problem.
Hi,
Hola, Nicholas. ¿Cómo estás? Hola. Hola. Ciao.
Understanding that there is much more to a successful project than good science, Bob tries to get to know the people involved, to understand how they live, to understand their culture and their needs.
Now, how difficult is it to introduce this technology? It is a simple technology, but these cultures aren't used to any of the modern technologies that we have. How difficult is it to introduce this kind of technology into that kind of culture?
I haven't really found it hard in this particular community, or really in other communities, because I guess what happens is they may or may not have much of a technical background, but they're just as bright as we are. And so if you explain it well, you don't use words that aren't necessary, you explain the process simply, I think they're quite capable of understanding it and sometimes improving what you're doing, or helping you find the best places to work, or suggesting ways with their own materials of doing things, whether it's as simple as what you use to mark the place on the ground, or what types of poles you might use. And I think if you don't explain to them what's happening, tell them how the process works, what the expectations are, what the timing is, then I think it's hard to get their support and get their involvement and get their work. You need their hands. You need them to feel they did it and that they can then take it over when you go, and it's their project.
What is it like inside?
I've never been inside. I've looked in the doors a bit.
Right.
I've always sort of felt it's an invasion of privacy to stick my head inside, but maybe once a person's been here a few times and you get to know some of the individuals, then it's something that you can do.
Right. I imagine it must be as primitive as it is on the outside.
Well, I'm sure it's mud floors, and I'm sure it's not too warm.
Right.
And I'm sure it's very, very smoky sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes, señora. And what's the volume of your container?
We had one 5-gallon one and we put it here. So that's a 5-gallon container.
5 US dollars?
What's that? 5? Yeah.
So it's 20 liters.
Yeah. He's worked in a number of other projects. He understands the problems that we've run into already, and I'm sure we'll anticipate a lot of the problems that we're going to encounter. My impression is that he's pretty tapped into what a villager in these kind of communities wants, and what the problems of these kind of systems are, and the need to work cooperatively and everything at its own pace.
So the easiest thing to do is if he's coming once a day on a routine basis to put a bigger container.
Yeah.
Fog collection projects like this one have meant the realization of a dream for Bob Schemenauer, that one day he would integrate his love of research and pure science with a significant social need, that he could make a difference. Years of scientific work with Environment Canada, studying the physiology of clouds, have paid off.
His work is very important to areas like this where they don't have the opportunity to go and turn a tap on for town water, for city water. So his technology and his contribution to areas where the technology fits with fog-producing areas is very important. Based on that alone, I have a lot of respect for him and his work.
These are some of the sorts of things we have to work out. But what do you think generally of how it's constructed?
Precioso.
Yes.
Precioso. Muy bien hecho.
It will be months before the people of Pachamama Grande know whether this experiment can give them plentiful, clean water. But further north near Quito, the first project in Ecuador is just beginning to produce results. Meet the people of Caspagassi. Next on Journeys.
Un conjunto es, ha venido señor, que vamos a participar aquí.
Bob Schemenauer's visit is a time of celebration for the people of Pachamama Grande. Because of his fog collection project, they may soon see clean, plentiful water flowing into their village, a luxury they have never known.
Now, how pervasive is the water problem in the developing world, would you say?
It's it's really becoming very serious because we're adding so many people so rapidly. I think in Africa, the figures are something like there's going to be 600 million more people in the next 20 years, just on a continent where we already know there are water problems in many places, either because of the scarcity or because of the polluted, contaminated water that people have available to them. And you see that in South America too. You see populations going up very rapidly, and you see problems starting to crop up like the cholera problems in Peru that are related to contaminated water sources and people having no other options because they had no wealth. They had nothing to spend to buy better water. So I think that as the populations grow and the water sources become more contaminated, at least the conventional water sources, water that comes from the ground, I think that the problems are only going to get worse.
While the aroma of chicken soup and guinea pig fills the room, Bob and Pilar meet with the people of Pachamama Grande. It's an important step toward helping them comprehend the science of the fog collection experiment and the time that's needed to make it work. Without their understanding and their backing, fog collecting won't work here, regardless of the environmental conditions.
We are very happy and we are very proud to be working with the community of Pachamama Grande. It's very important for the people to realize that this is a very unique project. This is one of the first 10 projects in the world with fog collection, and it's only the second project in all of Ecuador. So because of that, there will be much interest in what happens in Pachamama Grande. I think there's a positive attitude in the community, and I think that it'll become even more positive when the water flows into the community.
How important do you think that is, that people feel some kind of connection with what this is, that it's the people who are going to drink the water that actually build the nets?
I think it's absolutely essential because they're going to be the people who own the project, and they're going to be people who maintain it and carry it out and carry it on for hopefully generations. I mean, there's no real reason why the same people who built these can't build more of them. Maybe they can get a little bit of help to say this place is better than that place, but that same community can have a tradition of doing this. And there are a lot of other hills around here with fog, and can have more water in the community or in the area than what they're getting now. So I think without community involvement, if it's just a gift and we don't want them to have any part of it, I think it's crazy. It'll die for sure as soon as the first cable breaks.
Esperamos hasta cuándo, o no, tal vez quizás nos vería pues hasta enero, febrero.
The president of the village, Rosando, relays his people's enthusiasm about fog collection. Yet there's also a strong indication of skepticism and impatience.
People don't like to innovate. It will take time. It will take a long time. It's not easy to convince people to use it.
Why are people skeptical about this kind of system? Does it seem like a lot of magic or something?
Right, because they have never seen them. And it's not easy when they say, oh, we're going to take the water from the clouds. It's incredible.
People say,
right. It's like people saying, you work in the clouds. Oh, you live in the clouds. So people say, I can't believe it until they see it.
Bob, he's telling me that the winter time where the wet season is from November to May, so they will have 7 months of winter, and they would like to see how this works. So they don't want to wait until January and February to see this. He thinks that it would be great that if we could build only one, not more than one, and to put it somewhere so the people see and say and believe.
I think what we have to say is that we will try for January, which is a time before the really heavy rains begin in February, March, and April, and that we would try to understand by December where a good place would be, because we want to put the big collectors in good locations. This is very difficult for the community. It's difficult to bring materials. So we would agree with you that it would be good to build one or two before that very wet season, but build the rest afterwards.
Sometimes the realities of environmental science don't correspond with human needs and expectations. Rosando is concerned that if people don't see water flowing from the net soon, they'll lose interest, and that could spell disaster for the project. Hopefully, Bob's explanation is an agreeable one.
La demostración. ¿Qué es el efecto de demostración? Okay, he's saying yes.
Entonces vamos a la remalla hoy para sacar cuántas aguas. At the initial stages, I started the work here. It was to construct the collectors with local materials as much as possible, to install them with the help of the people here, to find and train someone in the community so that they can take the measurements each day, and hopefully the indigenous people will take over the responsibilities of the measurements themselves. You know, too many times, you know, we hear stories about poorly conceived projects done without consultation to the village, and as a result, we get projects that after a few years are abandoned or poorly maintained, and as a result, the investment that other countries have made, you know, is lost, and to the people that's lost too. So I think it's important from the start of a project to get the community involved and to have them involved all along from day one to right when the system's up and running, so the system can remain viable and well maintained.
And what has been difficult about that then to convey to the people who live here and who are helping you out? What's been difficult as far as getting them to understand that?
Well, first of all, they don't have much of an appreciation or much patience with our scientific methods and the need to be really specific about a lot of measurements. They don't quite understand the need to go to the collectors every day. If they haven't seen any rain or if they haven't seen any fog, and I asked them, you know, did you go today? They would go, well, why? But scientific data is, it's important to have consistent results every day. The same person going collecting the information, even if there's nothing in the 5-gallon containers, that's okay. That in fact is information that we need.
Now, how will you assess whether it's a viable way to go?
What we're going to do is measure for at least 6 months the amount of water that's collected each day, and in fact we'll measure it on an hourly basis with the data loggers, and then we're going to look and see whether or not the production is sufficient to justify having a project to provide water for a community the size of Pachamama Grande.
Now, what would that be as far as deciding what is enough or what is a good amount?
Typically, if we can collect an average of around 5 liters of water per day per square meter of mesh, and this is 1 square meter that we're looking at here, right, then that's sufficient to justify building some pipelines to take water to a community. We're always learning too. We're learning how to do it better and what the people expect of us. So what we learn from Pachamama Grande is going to be something that will help us in other places that we work. It's the ultimate goal. It isn't how much water can you collect, it's can you collect enough water to do things well.
About 5 hours north of Pachamama Grande, high on a crater rim known as Pululawa, water is beginning to flow from fog collecting nets, which is very good news for the people in the village below. This is the first project to get started in Ecuador, and already lives are changing.
It's amazing to me the speed that the drips are falling into this and collecting.
Often you can see when the fog is a little bit heavier, you can actually see the big drops coming down the back surface of the mesh. Here we can see them coming off the bottom cable. We don't see them so much coming down the surface.
Now, what is it made out of?
It's made out of a polypropylene fiber. It's used a lot for shading plants in tree nurseries, and in Chile it's made in big quantities for putting around vineyards to stop the wind.
It took a long time to perfect the science in this. What was the stumbling block?
It wasn't so much a stumbling block, but it was a matter of trying to understand which wind speeds were good to work in. Different fogs have droplets of different sizes in them, and those sizes are related to the conditions in the different sites. So we tried to understand the interrelationship of the different factors that are important in collecting fog.
And what kind of yield does this, let's say just this one big net have?
Well, this is about 25 square meters, what we're looking at here.
Right.
And it collects about 10 liters of water per square meter of mesh, which is, about that size per day. So we're looking at about 250 liters of potable water from just this small panel that we're looking at here each day of the year.
250
liters. So for a community of 250, even this one panel gives them each a liter of water a day.
And that'll make a drastic difference to lifestyle.
Quite a difference.
Yeah. Okay, now explain to me how this, literally how it works. As the fog moves against the net.
So what happens is if you look at the mesh really closely, what you see is it's made up of fibers that are about 1 millimeter wide. And here they're woven into a triangular weave, and then there's a double layer. That's why it looks so complicated. And 1 millimeter is a fairly decent width to try to collect droplets of fog as they come. Because as you can see, you can't feel anything in the air and you can't see anything in the air, and yet it's filled with very, very tiny droplets. So we try to find a place where these droplets are as big as possible. We try to find a fiber that's as narrow as possible, and this is about as small as is practical to go. And then we try to find a place where the wind is carrying the droplets so that they actually impact on the fibers. And it's the impact of those fog droplets on the fibers that eventually creates enough water in a place to form a bead of water that runs down. It takes 10 million of these tiny fog droplets to make a drop the size of a match head, like one of these small spots on here. So you have to collect billions and billions of these fog droplets to get drops of water coming off the bottom of the cable. That's a lot of water.
See the whole line of them down there. But you can see the fog passing right through.
Este es el baile del negro Macié, que lo baila todo el que lo ve. Siga, siga. Este es el baile del negro Macié, que lo baila todo el que lo ve. Alto, un dedín, otro dedín. Este es el baile del negro Macié.
40 kilometers north of Quito, the capital of Ecuador, the village of Caspagassi has about 250 people. Most commute to Quito to work. This place is just as parched as Pachamama Grande, but it's a more urban-influenced village, so the people have a bit more money for food and clothes, and of course childcare while they work.
You can just see in the faces that the children are healthier.
I know.
But still, I think you'll find they're a little bit smaller maybe than they should be, and the nutrition isn't quite what it should be. And so we look around, we don't see too much in the way of vegetable gardens or fruit trees or things they can eat to give them the nutrition they might want to have.
Right, right. So, but you don't think that the diseases are as serious here?
No, because I think the water quality in terms of bacterial quality is much better here.
Yeah.
It's just limited. They don't have the water they need.
I mean, it's amazing to me because seeing the children in Pachamama Grande, they looked dirty because there was nothing to wash in really, or the water was dirty. And the infections on the faces.
Yes.
And you don't see that here at all.
No, the contrast is tremendous. And I suppose it's partly just the cold weather up there too. It starts infections on the face or starts breaks in the skin where infections can get started.
Yeah.
And here, of course, it's a fair bit warmer. We're 1,000 meters lower and a gentler climate.
Yeah. I think, just the picture speaks so much louder than words that just simply what water, plentiful water can do.
That's right, and clean water.
With only 10 of the 60 fog collectors finished, the village already receives 15,000 liters of clean water every day. A vivid contrast from Pachamama Grande.
How does it feel for you to see the basic science that's done in the lab be taken out and applied to a community like this and do some good?
It feels great. It's something that really appeals to me, and it's something that I think I made a conscious direction to try to get into and follow and spend more time doing once I was given sort of the opening to get into it, which is really what happened back in the 1980s when the first project got started. I found that it's really something I enjoyed, and it's something that gave me a lot of satisfaction, and I think it's something that maybe more scientists would feel right about doing if somehow they could find an opportunity or find a way to see the work they're doing get right out to the people. Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
Where do you think they're at, the community of Caspagassi, in relation to the fog collectors? They fully accepted it, or what range are they at?
I think they're about where you and I would be if we were in the community. They were saying, well, we'll wait and see. They're just about at the borderline where the water is going to come on a regular basis. They've been up there enough, they know what the collectors look like, and they've been up there often enough that they've seen the flow of water from parts of the system. So they know there's water being produced by it. So I don't think they're skeptical. I think they passed that stage. But I think they're still at the stage where they say, okay, I want to see a real regular flow of water to my community before I'll go and talk to my uncle or my brother and say, hey, come and see what we have here. And I think that it'll become even more positive when the water flows into the community. What it takes is a number of demonstration projects in different places and media attention, and it takes a lot of energy to get people to sort of accept this as one of the common alternatives. And I think that's sort of where we're at now, in this convincing stage, that this really is a technology that's worth considering.
At the center of the community is a large reservoir collecting rainwater and fog water from the nearby nets. Here Bob and I join Pilar and Gabriel Zurita, the man who got behind fog collection here and pushed.
It's where people come together, and at the moment the activity is obviously washing clothes, but it's a chance to visit and talk and chat a little bit and socialize.
Initially, the people of Caspagassi were skeptical. They couldn't completely understand why, out of the blue it seemed, someone would want to help them get the clean water they needed. With Gabriel's coaxing, the people organized. Soon the entire village wanted to help collect water from the strange-looking nets on the crater rim.
Without Gabrielle, there wouldn't have been a project here, because all we had in 1992 was a number of sites scattered around Ecuador where we did measurements with the small collectors to see how much we could produce. And we were very enthusiastic about the results here, but there was nobody to pay for a water supply for the village. And really, Gabrielle essentially single-handedly went out and spent a year and a half looking for a funding source. And he found the people, and he convinced them, and he wrote the proposals. So he's the one who got this up and going.
Now, what was the reaction of people here when you first introduced the idea of the project?
¿Cuál fue la reacción de la gente cuando tú introdujiste la idea del proyecto?
Bueno, el proyecto...
At the beginning, without the community, until they knew that there was fog. They didn't want to create expectation to the people.
De esa manera, cuando ya teníamos la seguridad...
So when they were sure that they had water, they involved the community, and so they negotiate the project.
Y por eso no hemos tenido mayor problema.
So that's why we have not had any problem with the community, because they have been since the beginning, and they are collaborating, and they're doing together all the work.
So. And in fact, it was the people of the community itself that pulled and carried the poles up the cliff that you see over there,
really?
You know, on their shoulders, or pulled them up with ropes. So the people have worked very hard for the project.
How do you hope things will change around here then? Once the fog collectors are up and running, what do you hope will change?
¿Qué esperarías ¿Qué cambios esperarías tú que hubiera cuando llegue el agua en la manera de vivir?
Bueno, yo creo que mejora la calidad de vida porque disponen de más agua para...
When the water comes, the way of life, the quality of life changes. You get to a town where there's no trees, and then you find trees, and then you find the people having flowers, and then you find the people having vegetables. I think that is a big, big change. It may be that you don't see the people changing too much in their faces or in their clothes, but you know that the health is improving. I would say that it would have been very difficult in South America with these collectors if Bob wouldn't have been with us, for sure.
Why is that?
I will tell you. Because since 1960, we had projects in Chile, all experimental projects. And when I began with experiments. And once I said, I stopped, and I said, I don't want to do more experiments. The only thing we have here is studies and experiments. We need to study more, but not in this artisanal handicraft way. I don't know how to say. So when he came, we immediately began a big project.
Why would you say that Bob was so instrumental in pushing and keeping that going then?
I think he believed in the technology. He believed in the scientific part. He knew that the water was there, and he was the one that was convincing the people and pushed us too. Hey, change your Chilean way and do it in an operational basis.
How successful do you think these projects will be ultimately?
I think they're going to be very successful. I really think it's something that can be picked up and done by a lot of groups in a lot of countries. And I think the interest is quite high. And I think we're going to see a lot of replication because I think they have a role to play. People often say, okay, you've shown that this works. Why don't you just quit and go and do something else? And I guess my fear is that if not only myself, but the relatively small number of other people who are involved at a level where they can really provoke people to action, if we all say we're going to quit because it's all been done once, I think that the whole technology will start to drift down again. And I don't think we're at the point yet where those of us who are doing this type of thing can just back off and say, okay, now we'll do something else. Because I think it still needs more pushing. I think it needs more acceptance. I think we need to do a few more demonstration projects in places like Africa or in Southeast Asia, so people in those parts of the world with water problems don't have to go so far, or their local media will pick it up and show them what's possible. So I think we still have a fair ways to go, and I still have the enthusiasm to be part of that.